Welcome, one and all, to World in a Jar. We are your hosts, and Vale. Our goal is to take a word, concept, or idea and spin it into a story. Be it a character, NPC, group, city, you name it. And thus, those ideas we create become our World in a Jar. Of course, they won't all fit in the same jar, so our selection is constantly growing every week. With many spices to choose from, locations, genres, heroes, villains, and tropes, we hope to give you a jar filled with fun and interesting concepts. Welcome everyone. I am flying solo today. Kyoko was feeling under the weather, so I'm stepping in and doing whatever I want today. And I had to really think about what I wanted to do because there's so many episodes that I want to save for having a guest on. So we're just going to kind of go with old reliable, which is talking about my D&D game. I have been working on my 4 elements setting. It turns out for 4 years now. I found that out because one of my recommendations that I was going to have today, spoiler alert, the old podcast World Forge, one of their episodes, they helped me design a lot of the plot and creativity elements of my main campaign, which features the party on a living tree ship, sailing around, kind of doing what they want, and then also planning the quests to figure out how they're going to get what they want. So it's going to be kind of rambly today. I might go off on a lot of tangents. That's part of the bingo card. We really got to repost the bingo card. Chris, remind us to post the bingo card again. One of the things I wanted to ask you listeners before we start getting deep into it, we are always accepting recommendations for what to talk about, episode subjects, and then we're also very happy to get our grubby little fingers in on your D&D world if you ever need any help designing aspects for your world, or have something you just want to leave up to the fates and your good friends at World in the Jar. So if you ever need any help designing anything, me and Kyoko would be happy to tackle that, and just let us know. You can message us on Twitter at World in a Jar, or sorry, at Worlds in Jars, and then you can also email us at worldinajar1@gmail.com. So we're getting into my world a little bit again. Hopefully in the next couple weeks we'll have one of you lucky listeners to steer us into your campaign world to work on your stuff. But for now, I have a session 0 coming up for my main campaign, and I've been thinking about the first quest, which is also, it's usually the hardest for me to design the first quest in a campaign, because when I start thinking about a campaign, I like to begin with the end in mind. I want to know what the end game is, even if it's just a loose idea, like the god of undead enters the world and starts wreaking havoc, and the players have to figure out how to stop it. Or it could be kind of complex, like the gods are not what they seem, and then develop what the gods really are throughout the campaign, even if I don't have to have a very specific idea for what the gods really are. So this first quest, I'm calling it the last pilgrimage of the Earth Exarch. So if you're not familiar with what we've talked about my world before, this is a world centered around the 4 elements. where the overarching gods, like the greater pantheon, are 4 gods of each of the elements: water, earth, fire, and air, as well as elemental nations based around those elements. And this first episode, or not episode, this first arc, the players have just been hired on the ship, and their first quest they're undertaking is to transport the Exarch of the God of Earth, the Exarch being like the highest religious figure in their order. His name is Laurent. He's old as dirt and has gone through a lot of stuff to fight for the rights of the people in his country, that his god had beseeched him to become his highest religious figure. So that the main quest is transporting him to each of the other exarchs of the elements, because there's a location in the world called the Blessed City, in which it's basically like heaven on earth, where if you are sanctioned by all of the elemental faiths to enter it, you are granted entrance to it to live out the rest of your days in pretty much heaven, is what the culture is around that. And so now he's going around beseeching the other exarchs for his entrance, because he is now very old and not able to do as much as he once did. But the kind of secret campaign arc is that the party is going to be followed by a kind of ghost ship. I think I should also talk about the ship the party is sailing on. One of the party members is called the Ship Speaker. It's a role specifically for the ship that they're on, which is a living plant. It's basically one giant tree created by druids. I haven't figured out how long it takes them to build these ships. They're kind of built in the same style of bonsai trees, where there's like wires that force the roots to grow certain ways, so that way they're all tightly wound together to make the hull of the ship. And there's a whole lot of cool differences about this ship. Like it can grow fruits and vegetables naturally to feed its crew. If the ship favors the crew enough, it might start attracting animals that will be friendly with the party and live in or around the ship. Like one of Piper's ideas, Piper from Worldforge, was that basically there would just be like a pet shark that likes to live around the ship, because the fish are all attracted to the ship in a natural way. And so the shark gets friendly with the crew, because this is its best feeding ground, where all the fish kind of like reel in to observe this natural occurrence. And then there could also be other little fish that kind of attune to the ship as well. There are so many opportunities for pets, I think. The ghost ship is the example of what not to do with one of these ships. Basically, it suffered some tragedy as a tree ship. It caused it to wither and die and become undead, where it trapped all of its crew aboard as undead and like possessed their ghosts and whatnot. And so now it's very Flying Dutchman style vessel. Its kind of MO is that it outspeeds other ships. There's like a thick wall of fog surrounding it that confuses navigators that get trapped, and by then it's pretty much too late. The ghost ship rams into them and uses its roots to kind of grapple the hull of its prey. It doesn't necessarily kill all of the crew of its mark, but the ghosts kind of run out of their ship and grab crewmen and pull them back into the ghost ship. It may let the ship go. It might just kill the entire crew. I guess it depends on the strength of the crew it's trying to capture and turn into more ghosts and zombies and whatnot. And so I've got all of these neat plans, but there are a couple parts I don't really know for this quest. I'm kind of in the dark about the middle section, because we'll have like the first arc is going to be the players getting to know each other and their crew, and the X arc, they're going to briefly have run-ins with pirates, and they're going to come upon this one pirate captain. Their name is Captain Orchid. They, them, assigned problem at birth. They will introduce themselves as, with a score to settle with the captain, who was once a privateer who specifically hunted pirates. They're going to be a character. I think the party is going to capture them, and I kind of want them to turn into an anti-hero if the party is inclined to let them become one, where Captain Orchid might get closer to the crew and perhaps join the crew in some combats. I just don't really know the method of how that happens. I don't know the specific of the ghost ship's tragic event that caused it to become a ghost ship. And then I also need to figure out how it leads into the next arc, which I don't need the specifics of the arc at this point in time, but I know it's going to delve into eldritch horror, as the party deals with some lurking evils that are way beyond their skill set, leading up to the next arc, which is a lot more lighthearted as we explore Kyoko's character's family, as their character is expected to attend their mom's performance of one of the highest profile operas this year. So that was kind of laying the groundwork. I want to say some inspirations for this arc, of course, have to do with the World Forge episode. It was like an hour of just idea after idea after idea. I didn't want to rip entirely from the World Forge episode, so I am kind of putting my own spin on all the ideas that Sam and Piper presented that episode, which I'm just gonna I guess link it now. Their episode on the World Forge podcast is called Helping Build More Listener Worlds, The March of the Land Whales. It was just a great episode, gave me so many inspirations. The ghost ship, I have a kind of idea that I stole from Critical Role, where the end game of the second campaign, spoilers for the second campaign, where the party finds this ancient magical empire that dead and then transformed ex-party member was trying to basically control. It was shunted to the astral sea, and the Mighty Nine had to enter the astral sea and kind of destroy the entities at work, corrupting it into like a terrible, horrifying mass of like a city turned into flesh that captured all of its inhabitants under the control of 9 warring personalities that are all trapped within the city. What inspiration I drive from that arc is how the ghost ship traps sailors that it victimizes, where it is constantly pulling more souls into it to create a legion of undead in retribution for whatever tragedy has happened to it. And then also when the players destroy the ghost ship, which might not necessarily entail sinking it, but kind of exorcising it. One of the scenes that was kind of striking to me in Critical Role was after they had defeated the climactic villain of the campaign, all of the inhabitants that were transformed and corrupted and driven pretty much insane until the force was defeated. There is a scene where all of the inhabitants were kind of walking up to the party and just whispering, "Thank you, thank you," and then disappearing. That's kind of what I have in mind for the conclusion once they exorcise the ship, is all the ghostly inhabitants passing on to the next life and thanking the player characters for allowing them passage. And then also I have an idea to inspire the captain of the ghost ship after Lady Maria of Bloodborne. Lady Maria is probably one of the more tragic figures of Bloodborne. Bloodborne, everything is tragic and horror in the game. Lady Maria was one of the first hunter's pupils. She how do I describe Bloodborne lore in an introductory way? So basically, the organization that the hunters were working for were transforming mostly orphans, but also random citizens, into vessels to communicate with the Great Ones. So basically cosmic horror forces. Think Cthulhu, think that style of creature, basically living on a higher plane of existence than mortals. And she witnessed the horrors that happened to these people and tried her best to make it bearable for them, and then also realizing that the hunters had defiled a hamlet of these like fish people hybrids to the point where their god, which was one of the Great Ones, was slain by their actions. And that's kind of the central horror that caused Lady Maria to take her life in this nightmare realm. She is one of the bosses of the game as you finish the Astral Clock Tower, going into the final level, which is the fishing hamlet. She reawakens to prevent you from discovering the Eldritch Secret. The Eldritch Secret of the DLC she appears in. And she is a very heroic figure, but also incredibly tragic. Her design is going into the captain, where the captain was doing everything she could to maintain the tree ship, but also is the forefront of the tragedy that befell the tree ship that turned it into a monster. So yeah, let's just start creating. I've got a lot of unknown parts that I might touch on and then expand upon. This is kind of a world-focused episode, so I don't really have a theme, but I do have the first words generated before I generate my words. If you have a quest in your campaign that you need like central ideas, I just rolled for the random words torch and park, and then the TV trope for the second half is military school. So if you needed any inspiration, take any inspiration from those generations, let us know what you come up with. But now it's time for my words. We're going to start. Interesting. So my words are trial and circumstance. Ooh. Okay. So I briefly mentioned the ship speaker role for the player characters. One of the player characters is a druid that is charged with maintaining the ship. I think the captain of the ghost ship is at the center of the trial, where she is the ultimate authority on her ship, of course, but it is very necessary to have a druid to maintain the ship, or else it falls into disarray and withers and dies, and the crew is stranded at sea. So I think the trial centers around the crew's misgivings, perhaps. I think it has to do with the ship speaker on her ship. I think the ship speaker was kind of up to no good on the ship, and it came down to justice or life. And so this kind of paints the captain in a very interesting picture, and not what I thought of when I started inventing the ghost ship. There's also the word circumstance. I'm struggling to come up with a circumstance for this. So like the circumstances had to align where she could theoretically afford to lose her ship speaker. So perhaps there was thinking of a way that this can color both the ghost ship as well as like a cautionary tale for the captain of the players' ships. Okay, so we have to come up with the ship speaker. He might have been sowing some unrest towards the captain, and perhaps planning a mutiny against the captain. I think in that circumstance, she had to be ready to kill whatever crewmates threatened her rulership, which was not necessarily like a vindictive rulership, at least as far as I know yet. And in doing so, the ship speaker had to die, or else she would. I think it might be even as far as averting the ship's turn to piracy with her death, as the ship speaker tries to choose a better, more lucrative business for the ship, and met with complete resistance from the captain. So the captain had to enact justice against him, and she had to execute him in front of the crew to make them understand the grave mistakes he was going to make. And that ultimately doomed the ship because no one was prepared to maintain the ship magically. She may have thought she was close to land and was able to hire another druid. So then there might have been an aspect of getting lost at sea. And maybe just entirely being unable to control the ship. What else can I say about that? I kind of want to do a couple more words to divine a little bit more about the world that doesn't even necessarily have to revolve around the ghost ship. Oh, but really, these words just put that at the center as well. The new words are young and verdict, and I'm just like trial, verdict. How can young play into it? I might also be thinking of an entirely new direction to go in as well. Because trying to figure out how it works into like my final boss design for this quest is where they get to the core of the ship, and just like Lady Maria, the captain resurrects in this ship. There is also the ghostly aspect of the ship speaker that are going to fight together against the party, as well as a bunch of mooks. But the way they actually defeat them is the ship, basically, its undead soul inhabits one of these enemies at a time. And any damage that enemy suffers, the ship suffers. And the encounter ends when the ship is reduced to 0 hit points. And so maybe I can't really take it in a way that the ship speaker is against the captain. But I think the ship is definitely against the captain. Maybe through no, like, reasonable fault of the captain. Rethinking about the words trial and circumstance, and then verdict, I kind of think of another way to go with this, which is to have the ship be hunting a criminal of the law. Like maybe the captain was a pirate hunter. Perhaps she was searching for renown in this ship of already interesting design and kind of unique abilities compared to the rest of the naval knowledge of the world. So I'm thinking that the ship's speaker died in the conflict against this criminal. I think it began as a capture alive kind of task for the captain to enact. But once the ship speaker joined the battle, because a druid is still a very terrifying combatant on the sea, on land, just anywhere. Druids are very powerful. And so he joined the fight, and he unfortunately met his end. And so the verdict of the captain was, you killed what was giving my ship life. You are sentenced to death. So that would be the circumstance there. The circumstance caused her to lose the most vital aspect of having a tree ship. Do you think maybe the tree ship almost like died on the spot? Because a lot of the plans I have for that ship, like I said, is that it secures itself onto an enemy ship and drags the crew into its hull to become. Oh, and that's a cool design too. Like, I was thinking they would just drag them on board the ship and take them to the depths, and there would be a whole mass of bodies, like a mass grave underneath the ship. An even more fascinating and menacing design for this ghost tree ship is skeletons and dead pirates and people interwoven into the roots that form the hull. That's kind of metal. So I'm thinking that the ship kind of lost itself there, because the ship is also a living, breathing, sentient creature who relied on its ship speaker to convey its messages and its thoughts and its feelings to. And now that helper is gone and it doomed the ship. So that could be like the seat of the curse, is not necessarily that there was a tragic incident that caused the ship to turn undead. The tragedy is the ship's now entire pursuit of revenge. And so the ship kind of steps in with the captain. The captain thinks this is a cool moment when the ship itself is launching whatever, like, natural items it can against the pirate enemies. I think once it loses its ship speaker, it kind of goes mad from that incident, even though they defeat and probably just outright sink the enemy vessel. It tries to sustain itself as best it can without being able to convey to any of the humans on board how to preserve its life. It uses the corpses of the enemy crew and eventually the crew itself to sustain its, like, nutritious font. Like, imagine it dragging bodies through the hull and, like, draining their blood into its freshwater supply to give it a lot more nutrients and hydration. But still, that's not enough. The ship can't sustain itself forever. The ship loses control of itself, and it transforms itself into the Davy Jones figure, kind of outright malice and, like, I would say omnicidal tendencies. And that could even play, because a lot of these ships are kind of flavored as being ancient, that they'd have the knowledge of a very old tree. This was the ship's first voyage, from what I can tell. The ship was very young and impressionable and prone to emotional outbursts. That it relied on the ship speaker to convey and tame and guide. And so I think that's a very interesting way to take the ship. And that also gives rise for all of the bodies on the ship to resurrect as pirate zombies and stuff like that, which is a very, very interesting design in my head. So I think that's where I'm going to leave the idea for the ghost ship until the trope. Yeah, we'll see you for trope time. All right, we're back with trope time. Let's see what the tropes have to offer. I have to roll another trope because the trope it rolled was literally how I planned the final boss of the tree ship. I believe it starts with like a picture, I believe, of one of the Metroid games. The trope is called Reactor Boss. In some cases, the final battle in a video game will consist of you trying to blow up the enemy base's main reactor, typically guarded by automatic turrets, an endless swarm of mooks, and occasionally emissions from the reactor itself. That's kind of what I already envisioned for the final boss, in which they're fighting the ship itself to undo its undead essence and exercise it, with the ship both inhabiting these spirits or these corpses and then bolstering them further in the fight. So I'll just have to roll another trope because I've already got that covered. This one is called Virtue is Weakness. It says compassion, generosity, mercy, honesty, honor, loyalty, justice, friendship, and love. It's through these values by which people are able to cooperate and society is able to function. One way to show a bad guy really kick the dog is to express his distaste for these virtues. It's not that he absolutely can't comprehend good. He understands exactly what goodness entails and views it as an unnecessary burden that would hold him back and a weakness to be exploited in others. Though it is possible for the bad guy to share both of these tropes, in that the villain may not understand it at first, but later on might scoff at such a concept with ridicule. Because I have a lot more unknown pieces of this quest, and I kind of designed what I had the most design for. I do have the kind of I do have Captain Orchid, the pirate captain that the party is going to capture. I do have them to design as well. And so I did have the idea to play Orchid as an anti-hero. This would lean more into villainous tendencies. And that would be completely opposite to the main quest, which is Laurent, the Exarch of Earth, who had a life of virtue and resistance against evil for the greater good of his people. Captain Orchid is a lot more self-serving. They have to be a little bit more self-serving to be a pirate, to be the captain of a pirate ship. But I kind of want to spin that in a way that helps the party. Or perhaps the party can change about Captain Orchid. Captain Orchid is a storm sorcerer. And I think they have to have a kind of no-holds-barred fighting style. I think they're one level above the party. The party starts at 4th level. Captain Orchid may be 5th or 6th level, which means they get access to Lightning Bolt and Fireball, the classic sorcerer 3rd level spells. So as the party fights Captain Orchid and kind of the elite members of Captain Orchid's crew, the way I have that planned is that there's going to be like a ship-based brawl where the whole crew of the player's ship is fighting against the whole crew of Captain Orchid's ship. But the players so that way they're not fighting a mountain of enemies and I'm not running a mountain of allies. It's going to be a little bit more self-contained, where the brawl between player's crew and enemy's crew is more of a terrain feature, and the party is facing the elites a little bit more specifically. And so Captain Orchid just opens up with a fireball and starts torching the tree ship. They have no inclination to prevent the party's tree ship from becoming another ghost ship. They just have a score to settle against their formerly privateering captain. So they're a lot more self-serving. They have their own goals, and once the party subdues them, I have to figure out how to play someone with few virtues as not a complete villain that the party is gonna like go to the next port and pawn them off for their bounty. Maybe I need to roll another trope to figure that out. Let's see. No, that's the opposite. That's the opposite. I rolled protagonist journey to villain. That tells me the opposite of what I'm looking for. No way. Okay, let's try it again. Interesting. The trope I rolled is the cabin boy. A cabin boy is a crew member on a ship, almost always the youngest person aboard, who waits and performs various errands on a ship, such as relaying messages, carrying buckets of food across the ship, scrubbing the deck, and keeping the wheel steady during good weather. They're typically at the very bottom of the ranks on a ship. In stories, the cabin boy tends to be either a preteen or a young teenager, though they can sometimes be in their late teens or a young man. Either way, they're far younger than the rest of the crew. In a story set at sea, if the cabin boy is not the protagonist, they'll usually be a tag-along kid of sorts. If they're a cabin boy to a pirate ship, they'll generally be the least villainous one aboard, as children are innocent. So I have to figure out if this cabin boy is a member of Captain Orchid's ship, or if they're a member of the party's ship. But this kind of adds an interesting perspective, no matter what, of the lowest ranking grunt of the grunts of one of the ships is able to talk some good into Captain Orchid. I rolled another random word to kind of give me guidance which ship they're going to come from. I got relation and packet. Relation, I think, is the main driving word of that. They do have a relation to Captain Orchid. Maybe even like a familial relation. So they definitely have to be one of Captain Orchid's crew. This cabin boy or girl is Captain Orchid's sibling. I think I've just developed about Captain Orchid. Of course, came from squalor. First chance they got, they joined a pirate ship, and eventually became renowned and wealthy enough to be their own menacing captain of a crew. As the pirates are kind of more in like a close network of pirates under the banner of a leader of the pirates, Captain Orchid has kind of worked their way up the ranks. And I think this adds an interesting perspective. A lot of their self-centeredness is to give their young sibling a good, wealthy, prosperous life to live. So their self-centeredness is not only about forging their own gains, but is also to protect and bolster their sibling, their closest confidant, who is too young to be really much of anything on a ship. But yeah, I think that's the interesting. I think that's how I've just gained the way to change Captain Orchid from a villain to anti-hero or hero, is that their young cabin boy sibling is close with the party and likes to talk with the party and learn more about the party and how they fared in their lives, and has a sense of good, to convince Captain Orchid we have better ways of doing what we need to in the world to survive. I think that's really good, actually. So Captain Orchid kind of abandoned virtue in the prospects of fortune, infamy, and posterity. And so it's through their goal to help their sibling that they can be convinced to be good. I think that's a great place to leave. it. I didn't get all my questions answered. I didn't even talk about one of my questions, which was it's the first iron-bound vessel. I was trying to figure out what their occupation is, but I got a lot of questions answered this episode. So I think it's a good idea to seal up this jar and put it on the market. If you like this show or need any ideas, you can find us on Twitter at worldsinjars, or email us at worldinajar1@gmail.com. Like I said, my recommendation this episode is to check out our predecessor podcast, World Forge, especially the episode that guided pretty much this entire campaign, designing the tree ship and the ghost ship. And it might be interesting to see what ideas I might have stolen from that episode that was published in 2020. That is how long I've been developing this world and this campaign. I'm kind of the opposite of Brennan Lee Mulligan, who is famous for how much he improvs during session, versus me, who spends so much time deliberating on the details to forge a very coherent world. And Sam and Piper immensely helped create this campaign. Through that episode and all of the other ideas that their show, which you can catch up on because they're no longer releasing episodes, inspired for me. So yeah, definitely check out World Forge. See if I don't know what I'm saying. Do something good for yourself. We will see you next week. This episode was edited by Chris at ChrisRogersVO on Twitter. Go check him out.